Hello, and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. Let's take this time together to step away from the rush of the day and ease into a world of dreams and wonder. Tonight, I'll tell you a story about a swift-footed huntress whose heart was as wild as the wind and as steady as the stars. This is the story of Atalanta's Footrace, a tale of quiet strength, golden apples, and the soft turning of fate beneath the whispering trees. But before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what time is it as you settle in to hear this story? We'd also love to know what kinds of stories you'd enjoy next. Your thoughts and suggestions inspire us, so please share them in the comments below. If you'd like even more from us, you can check out our Patreon for early access to all our stories and a curated Spotify playlist as well. And if you've been enjoying our bedtime stories, subscribing is a simple and free way to support us. Your support means the world to us, and together we can make TerraNash an even more peaceful place for storytelling. Now, take a moment to get comfortable. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breath slow. Feel the weight of the day melt gently away with each exhale. There's nothing to do, nowhere else to be. Just you and this quiet moment. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let the soft glow of the story wrap around you like a gentle blanket. You're in a safe space now, where wind speaks in whispers and time moves like drifting leaves. Let's begin. In a quiet corner of Arcadia, where sunlight filtered through silver leaves and the breeze hummed ancient lullabies, a young girl ran barefoot across moss and wildflowers. Her name was Atalanta, and she moved like she belonged to the wind itself, light, swift, and utterly free. The forest had raised her, not a palace, nor a city of stone, only trees and birds and creatures who knew no harm. When she was just a baby, she had been left at the foot of a great fig tree, swaddled in soft cloth, her cries blending with the rustling leaves. But the forest, gentle and wise, heard her. A she-bear, kind and protective, nursed her. Forest nymphs with eyes like dewdrops whispered songs over her cradle of woven vines. She grew beneath the boughs, learning not just to survive, but to listen. Atalanta's feet knew every twist of root and bend of stream. She ran not for victory, but for joy. Her laughter echoed through the hills like wind chimes in the breeze. The birds knew her. The deer trusted her. Even the foxes would sit a moment longer when she passed. Though she had no crown, no title, there was a quiet strength about her that made even the elders of the woods pause. And though she was still young, stories about her had begun to drift beyond the trees, of the girl who could outrun the stags, whose arrows flew straighter than falcons, and whose heart beat to the rhythm of the wild. But when night fell and stars pressed their soft light upon the canopy, Atalanta would sometimes sit alone by the river's edge, feet dipped into cool waters. She would watch the current flow and feel a stillness settle inside her. It wasn't sadness, exactly. More like a question, one she didn't yet have the words for. The wind would tug gently at her braid. The trees would whisper her name, as though remembering a story not yet finished. Atalanta didn't know then that her feet would one day carry her far beyond the woods, or that the same breeze that cradled her cradle would carry the scent of change. But for now, she was the wind's child, wild, free, and unaware of the race that destiny was quietly preparing in the distance. The seasons turned gently in Arcadia, and with each passing year, Atalanta grew stronger, swifter, more sure of the earth beneath her. Yet one evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the treetops gold, something shifted. The forest, which had always felt like a lullaby, suddenly seemed to hush, as if holding its breath. That night, the owl came. It was not the first time Atalanta had seen it. This great white owl with feathers dusted in silver. But never before had it flown so close. It landed on the branch just above where she slept, its eyes wide and glowing like twin moons. It didn't hoot, nor flap its wings. It simply looked at her and began to speak, though not with words. The message came like a dream wrapped in mist. In the vision, Atalanta stood not in her beloved woods, but at the edge of a great stone courtyard. A crowd had gathered, their faces soft and blurred like leaves in a breeze. One by one, men stepped forward, proud and eager, offering gifts, vows, even kingdoms. But Atalanta, heart steady, turned each one away. Then came a whisper in the dream. None shall wed the wind's daughter unless they match her step for step. She saw herself racing along a long path, her braid streaming behind her like a banner. The suitors chased, but they were always just behind. Each time they fell short, they vanished, like morning fog lifting from the forest floor. When she awoke, the owl was gone. Only a single feather remained, resting beside her on the moss. Pale, almost translucent, and cold to the touch. She picked it up and turned her face to the wind. Though she didn't fully understand the meaning of the vision, she felt the truth of it settle deep inside her bones. Something was coming. A time of choices. A test not just of speed, but of spirit. Later that day, she visited the glade of whispers, a quiet ring of elder trees, where forest folk sometimes left messages in the form of petals, stones, or runes scratched into bark. There, she found an acorn carved with a spiral, a sign of fate unfolding. That evening, Atalanta spoke aloud to the wind. If they must race, then let them run. I will not be won by gold, nor promise, nor name. only by one who knows the rhythm of my footsteps and the silence between them. The forest listened, and far beyond the woods, the world began to stir. News of the huntress who would race her suitors began to travel. Some laughed, others grew curious, but a few, a quiet few, began to prepare. Word travels differently when it carries a touch of magic. It didn't spread through messengers or scrolls, nor by heralds crying from castle towers. No, this news rode on quieter wings. Birds flew low with murmurs in their song. Traders passing through Arcadia left with curious tales. And in villages far and wide, people began to speak of the huntress who would only marry a man who could outrun her. Many scoffed, others raised a brow, but for a select few, something stirred, a flicker of challenge, pride, or perhaps destiny. Atalanta, meanwhile, remained in her forest haven, letting the story ripple outward like circles in a still pond. She did not rush to prepare. She did not sharpen her arrows, nor craft a crown of wildflowers. She simply continued to run, each morning through sun-dappled paths, and each evening beneath the hush of twilight, her footsteps steady, her soul serene. Then, one morning, the wind changed. A stranger arrived in Arcadia, not by chance, but as though led by invisible strings. He was a kind man, quiet-eyed and thoughtful. His name was Melanion, not a prince, nor warrior, just a wanderer who listened more than he spoke. When he heard the tale of Atalanta, he did not laugh. He did not boast. Instead, he closed his eyes, as if remembering a dream he'd nearly forgotten. He went to the shrine of an old goddess, hidden beneath vines and thyme. There, he offered her honey, almonds, and a single golden flower, plucked at dawn. "Great lady," he whispered, "I do not seek to conquer her. I seek to understand her. Show me how to run not ahead of her, but beside her." The goddess, ancient and kind, stirred in her silence, and in the rustle of leaves and the shimmer of morning light, she gave him 3 golden apples, small, perfect, glowing faintly with something otherworldly. "Do not use them as weapons," the wind seemed to say. "Use them as pauses." Back in the forest, Atalanta stood in the clearing where the races would be held. Not a stadium, not a place of trumpets or banners, just earth and space and sky. A line was marked with smooth stones, a path cleared between trees and flowers, and from the woods came the suitors, many of them loud, proud, adorned in silks or armor. Some sneered when they saw her, this barefoot girl with a braid and no crown. But Atalanta said nothing. She met each of their eyes only once, then turned toward the path. "If you lose, you leave. If you win..." She paused, her voice soft but firm. Then you must love not just the runner, but the wind that runs with her. And so, the races began. Each one tried, each one failed. Some ran well, others stumbled. Some shouted her name, trying to distract her. Others carried charms, whispered spells. But all were left behind. Atalanta barely breathless, her feet never faltering. By the time Melanion stepped forward, the clearing had grown quiet. He held no sword, wore no jewels, just a simple tunic and a steady heart. Atalanta looked at him, not with challenge, but with curiosity. The breeze picked up, playful and expectant. And far above, the owl watched in silence. The forest clearing held its breath. Melanion stood at the starting line, his hands loose at his sides, his gaze steady. Not on the prize, but on Atalanta herself. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He simply offered her a quiet nod, as if saying, "I see you." Atalanta, usually unshaken, felt something curious flutter in her chest. It wasn't nerves, not fear, something softer, like the first note of a song you don't yet know, but already love. Then, the wind shifted, a soft rustle through the trees, the signal to begin. They ran. Atalanta surged forward like she always did, graceful and sure, feet barely kissing the earth. Her braids streamed behind her, catching the light. Melanion followed, swift in his own right, but not trying to outpace her. Not yet. The first stretch of the race wound through the silver pine grove, where the ground was soft with fallen needles. Melanion kept his breath calm, watching the space between them. He knew he couldn't outrun her, but he remembered what the goddess had said. Use the golden apples not to win, but to remind her of something she's forgotten. At just the right moment, he reached into the small satchel at his side and drew the first apple. It shimmered faintly in the dappled light, golden as morning, warm as memory. He tossed it gently, so it landed just off the path, rolling into view. Atalanta noticed it. Her stride faltered, only for a breath, and she turned her head. Something about the apple tugged at her, not greed, nor wonder, but familiarity, as if it whispered of moments long past, of childhood laughter, of honeyed sunlight through fig leaves, of things she had once loved and let go. She slowed, just for a heartbeat. Melanion passed her, not in triumph, not in mockery, simply continuing on the path. She quickly returned to pace, catching up with ease. But as they ran, she studied him, not as a rival, but as a question. Who was this man who dared to run beside her without reaching to take? The race curved now through the hill of sighing grass, where wind always played gentle music. Atalanta felt the rhythm of her own footsteps, but also, oddly, the comfort of another's beside her. The forest was still, the birds quiet. The owl, unseen, tilted its head in watchfulness, and behind them the golden apple lay in the grass, not forgotten, but waiting for meaning to unfold. The path twisted gently now, leading into the heart of the old forest, a place even Atalanta rarely visited. Here, the trees grew taller, older. Their bark was deep with time, and their leaves whispered in a language older than words. Atalanta and Madeline ran in silence. The golden apple, left behind on the hill, still shimmered faintly like a forgotten dream, but its echo lingered in Atalanta's chest. It wasn't just a trick. It had meant something. She wasn't sure what yet, but she knew he hadn't dropped it to distract her. He had placed it there like an invitation, to slow down, to notice, to feel. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just running ahead of him. She was running with him. Madeline didn't chase her. He didn't rush or push. He ran with grace and purpose, as though the race was not a contest, but a conversation. He listened with his stride, responded with his breath. And something in that quiet rhythm spoke to Atalanta in a way no suitor ever had. Then came the second apple. This time, Madeline waited until they reached a bend in the path, where the light broke through the canopy and bathed the forest floor in golden beams. Here, he released the apple, not to the side, but directly in her view, where it came to rest beneath a small fern. Atalanta slowed again, her feet pausing of their own accord. The apple pulsed gently with warmth. She stared at it, unmoving. Something opened inside her, soft and sudden, like the scent of blooming lavender. She thought of her childhood, the quiet moments by the river, the dreams she didn't speak aloud, the loneliness she never let show. The apple didn't tempt her. It reminded her. She looked up, and Madeline was not far ahead. He had stopped, just for a moment, waiting, not urging her to catch up, not claiming victory, just being there. She picked up the apple. It was warm, like it had been resting in the sun. She held it gently, then set it on a nearby stone where the forest could keep it. And then she ran, not to win, not to beat, but to return to something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The two of them ran together again, and the forest seemed to sigh in approval. The trees leaned in close, the path smoothed, time slowed. And high above, hidden behind the light, the goddess smiled. There was one apple left, but now the race was no longer about who would cross the finish line. It had become a story of listening and learning how to let someone in without losing yourself. The final stretch of the path wound low through a valley of soft moss and silver fog. Here, the world felt gentler, more hushed, as if even the birds knew to hold their songs a little longer. Trees bent low, not in age, but in reverence. Flowers opened without sunlight, their petals glowing pale in the mist. Atalanta ran, but no longer in the way she had before. Her strides were still swift, her balance still perfect. But her heart, it had changed tempo. The rhythm was no longer a race, it was a harmony. Beside her, Madeline matched her steps, not in competition, but in conversation. Their footfalls fell like soft percussion on the moss, the sound of two lives in motion, not seeking victory, but something quieter, something shared. And then, with hands that did not tremble, Melanian reached into his satchel for the final golden apple. This one glowed differently. Not brighter, but deeper. Like candlelight remembered from childhood, or the glint of eyes across a campfire. He didn't toss it ahead. He didn't place it on the path. He simply held it out to her. Atalanta slowed to a walk, the world around them growing still. She looked at the apple, then at Melanian. In his eyes, there was no trick, no test, no triumph, just truth. A quiet truth. "I don't want to win," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I only wanted to be near you long enough for you to see me." She stood still, breath soft in the cool morning air. The fog curled around them like a gentle veil, and the golden apple sat in his open palm, catching the light like a slow, steady heartbeat. Atalanta reached out, not for the apple, but for his hand. Their fingers touched, and in that moment, the wind returned, not as a gust, not as a roar, but as a breath. It moved through the trees, rustling the leaves with approval. Far above, the owl flew once in a wide, silent circle before vanishing into the mist. Somewhere unseen, the goddess closed her eyes. Atalanta did not finish the race. Neither did Melanian. Together, they walked the final stretch of the path, not as rivals, not as strangers, but as something quietly new. Not a prize claimed, not a vow exchanged, just two souls who had stopped running, not because they were tired, but because they'd finally arrived. The mist began to lift, revealing the wide sky above. The path before them stretched onward, but no longer with the tension of a contest, no longer with the weight of an expectation. Now, it was just the world, wide, open, waiting. Atalanta and Melanian walked side by side, their steps light on the moss, their silence not empty, but full. The golden apple, still resting in Melanian's hand, had lost its power to test or challenge. It was simply a gift now, passed between them in understanding, an offering that didn't need words to carry its meaning. "I've never run with someone like this," Atalanta murmured, her voice barely louder than the breeze that stirred the branches overhead. "Always, I've been alone, racing to be faster, stronger." Melanian looked at her, his eyes kind. "Maybe it wasn't the speed you needed. Perhaps it was the company you didn't know you were missing." Atalanta looked ahead, the trees parting to reveal a wide meadow, bathed in soft sunlight. The wind was warm now, the scent of flowers and earth filling the air. The race, once a contest, had become a journey, a quiet unfolding of two lives walking towards something unknown but peaceful. They walked together, not in a rush, not in search of an end, but simply being together. And for Atalanta, that was something she had never truly known she craved. Not glory, not victory, not even the thrill of the race. Just the gentle companionship of someone who understood that sometimes the most beautiful part of a story is not the destination, but the journey itself. As they reached the edge of the meadow, Atalanta stopped for a moment. She turned to Melanian, who had stopped beside her. She looked at the golden apple, still in his hand, now resting between them like a symbol of their quiet connection. "The race," she said, "was never really the point, was it?" Melanion smiled, and his voice was full of warmth. "No, it wasn't. The point was always the moment between steps, the breath before the finish line." Atalanta nodded. She had always believed that the finish line was where everything ended, but now, with Melanion by her side, she understood. There were no finish lines for hearts that ran together. There were only new paths to walk side by side. And in the quiet of the meadow, with the wind softly carrying the scent of the earth, Atalanta realized that she had already won. Not because she had outrun anyone, but because she had finally found someone to run with. As they continued walking, the golden apple gently rested between them. They didn't need to say much more. There was no race left to run, no prize to claim, only the peaceful promise of the journey ahead. The meadow was still, but alive with the hum of nature. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The trees stood tall and patient, their leaves whispering stories to one another. In this place, the world seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for something to unfold. And indeed, something was unfolding, not on the ground, but in the air. Atalanta and Melanion continued walking, side by side, no longer as competitors, but as travelers on a shared path. They spoke little, letting the rhythm of the forest surround them. Yet there was a conversation happening all around them, a quiet one, a song woven in the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, and the distant sound of a stream flowing somewhere in the depths of the forest. Melanion noticed it first, a soft melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was as though the forest had always been singing, and now, with Atalanta beside him, the song was being heard for the first time. "This," he said softly, "is the song of the forest. It speaks to those who listen." Atalanta paused, her feet still upon the soft moss, and listened. She had always heard the forest, of course, the wind in the branches, the call of the birds, the rustle of the leaves beneath her feet. But this was different. This was a song, delicate yet profound, a melody carried on the breeze that stirred the air between them. She closed her eyes, letting the music fill the space around her. There were no words, no clear tune, just the soft harmony of the world, the kind of sound you felt more than you heard. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I've heard it before," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I didn't know what it was." Melanion nodded. "It's the song of everything, of the earth and the sky, of the trees and the rivers, of every step we take." Together, they stood there, listening to the forest's quiet symphony. For the first time in so long, Atalanta felt no need to rush, no need to chase after something, to outpace the world or herself. She could simply be here in the company of Melanion, surrounded by the song of the earth. After a long while, the song of the forest seemed to settle into a soft hum, like the quiet after a storm, when all things rest in peaceful understanding. They continued their walk, the forest opening before them, a place of soft paths and hidden glades. Each step was a note in the melody, each moment a chorus of quiet togetherness. There was no destination, no finish line to cross, no race to win. There was only the peace of the journey. The wind, the trees, and the soft sounds of their own footsteps carried them forward, together. And as the sun sank low in the sky, painting the meadow with hues of gold and lavender, Atalanta knew that this was the true gift of the race. Not the golden apples, not the finish line, but the simple gift of walking beside someone who understood that the journey was enough. The evening deepened around them, the sky painting itself with shades of lavender and soft peach. The forest, once so full of quiet, now seemed to hum with an energy all its own, as though the trees themselves were aware of the peace that had settled between Atalanta and Madeline. They walked still, side by side, as the path ahead of them curved gently, revealing more and more of the quiet beauty of the land. The breeze shifted, and for a moment, the air felt charged with something new, something they had not yet fully understood. Atalanta looked over at Madeline, her gaze soft but searching. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely more than a murmur, as though she were asking the wind itself. Madeline smiled, a gentle, knowing smile, as if he had been waiting for her to ask this very question. He looked ahead, where the path led into a grove of ancient trees, their trunks thick with age, their branches reaching high into the twilight sky. "What happens now," he said, "is that we walk, not toward a goal, not toward a finish line, but towards something we can't yet see. The journey, Atalanta, never ends. It changes, it deepens, it grows, but it is always moving forward." Atalanta felt the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had always thought of life as a race, a contest, a pursuit of something she had to win. But here, walking beside Madeline, in the quiet company of the trees, she realized that perhaps the true gift was not in the destination, but in the journey itself, in the moments of silence shared, in the trust between them, in the peace of simply being. "I think," she said slowly, "that for the first time, I'm not afraid of what's ahead." Malanian's smile softened, and he nodded. "Because you've stopped running. You've stopped trying to outrun yourself. Now you walk in harmony with the world, and in that, you'll find everything you need." The wind carried their words into the forest, the trees bending to listen. They walked on together, hand in hand now, their hearts in sync, the golden apple long forgotten, its purpose no longer needed. The race was over, but something far more beautiful had begun. As they moved deeper into the grove, the air grew cooler, and the stars began to twinkle softly above them. The path, bathed in moonlight now, seemed to stretch on forever, an endless road, full of promise, full of quiet moments, full of new beginnings. Atalanta no longer felt the weight of the past, the burden of expectations. She was free, not because she had won a race, but because she had found a companion who understood that there is no need to run when the world itself is at peace. And in that peace, they walked forward, together, The moon hung high above the grove, casting its soft, silvery light on the path that stretched before them. The trees, ancient and wise, stood like silent guardians, their branches reaching out in gentle embrace. The air was cool, but the warmth between Atalanta and Madeline filled the space, wrapping them in a quiet, comforting glow. They had walked for what felt like hours, though neither counted the time. It no longer mattered. Time itself seemed to slow, as though the world had decided to hold its breath in their presence, letting them savor the peace they had found. Atalanta had never known such calm. The weight of her past, the expectations of her speed, her strength, her unyielding drive to outrun everything, had slipped away with each step they took together. Here, in the quiet of the forest, there was no race, no competition, no need to prove anything to anyone. She turned to Madeline, her face soft with a peaceful smile, and said, "I never knew that there could be a race that didn't require running." Madeline smiled back, his eyes filled with the warmth of understanding. Some races are won not by speed but by patience, not by crossing the line first, but by walking side by side, in harmony with the world around you. And so, they continued walking, hand in hand, without hurry. The path wound through the grove, and though it seemed to stretch on endlessly, Atalanta no longer felt the need to reach any destination. She had already arrived. The journey, she realized, was not about finding an end, but about the steps taken along the way. As they reached a small clearing, the soft glow of fireflies danced around them, their delicate lights flickering in time with the rhythm of the night. The forest hummed with life, and Atalanta could hear the song of the earth, the song that had always been there, waiting for her to listen. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her, feeling the deep connection to the world around her. She could hear the whisper of the trees, the murmur of the stream, the soft call of an owl in the distance. It was a symphony, not of notes, but of moments, each one more beautiful than the last. And then, in the quiet of the night, something shifted. The air grew still, and Atalanta felt a sense of peace so deep, so profound, that it seemed to fill her entire being. The race was over, yes, but something even more wonderful had begun. The path ahead, endless and full of promise, was theirs to walk together, not in competition, but in companionship. There was no finish line. There were only new horizons, waiting for them to explore. And in that moment, Atalanta understood. The race had never been about winning. It had never been about proving herself or outrunning anyone. It had always been about finding peace within, about sharing the journey with someone who understood that life was not a race. It was a path, winding and beautiful, always moving forward, but never leaving you behind. Atalanta turned to Madeline, her heart full of gratitude, full of love, and full of quiet joy. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft as the night air, "for showing me that there is more to life than running." Madeline smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "There is always more," he said, "as long as you are willing to walk." And so, They walked on, together, through the quiet night, the stars above them, the earth below them, and the promise of the endless path ahead, where no race could ever be won, but where peace would always be found. And as they walked, the forest around them whispered its approval, the trees swaying in the soft wind as the world continued to turn, slowly, quietly, and forever onward. The end, but not the end, only the beginning. With that, we reach the close of Atalanta's journey. Thank you for joining her and Melanian as they discovered that sometimes the most beautiful part of a race is not crossing the finish line, but simply walking together.